Ukraine has retaken 7 settlements, 160 square kilometers, 60 square miles, in Donetsk. The Russian line is bending, and now it is beginning to break under the immense pressure. This is no longer a Russian defense. This is a Russian rollback, and Ukraine is dictating the tempo. Donetsk, of course, is more than just ground on a map. It is the road network that feeds the Russian army. When the crossroads fall, convoys slow. Fuel runs out, and the artillery falls silent. Whoever holds these junctions decides who will attack tomorrow. Wars are not won by slogans, they are won by supply lines. And right now, Russia is going to have a lot more problems. Because every kilometer that Ukraine takes out, that Ukraine destroys, cuts Russia's ability to route its convoys, to route its supplies, and that closes down more depots supplying the front lines. Trucks are forced onto longer roads. They burn more fuel, lose cover, and arrive too late. They also become the targets of Ukrainian drones. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kyiv Post and a national security advisor. What we see going on right now is simply incredible. The Russian military is getting pushed further and further back. Russia is struggling to maintain what it already has. The idea of advancing is no longer their objective. Their objective is simply to keep what they are currently occupying. But we've seen that Russia, in its recent pushes, made a lot of fatal mistakes. Russia's latest push created a fatal bulge in the front. A salient looks like progress, but it is easy to surround and impossible to sustain. Think about this. Moscow reached within 8 kilometers, 5 miles, of Konstantinovka, and it was within just 40 kilometers or 25 miles of Dobropilya. Yet, under Ukrainian fire, that bulge cannot sustain for long. That bulge cannot survive. Ultimately, a position without supplies is not a fortress. It is a target, a sitting duck. A target cut off because it's in a pocket, and pockets become craters. The deeper that Russia pushes without roads, the faster it bleeds out in retreat. Ukraine does not need to crush it with the spearhead. It doesn't need to take it all out at once. It needs to grind it down, as it is right now. We see that the map on the front is changing. And what's incredible about this is that the press does not pick it up. The press, as usual, does not talk about Ukraine's successes. It complains about how Ukraine has its setbacks, or that Russia claims it's doing fine. But let's look at the maps. Let's look at the data and determine how the situation truly is today inside of Russia and inside of Ukraine. And when we look at that, you will see things are far better for Ukraine than what is popularly reported in the West. So please help me get this word to more people of why Ukraine matters, why we are fighting for Ukraine, and the fact that Russia can and will be defeated. Your means of doing that is very simple. Please just like this video, subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. You can also leave your comments below what you see of the current situation, and also why the Western press simply does not pick up the fact that Ukraine is having one victory after another. It is winning more now than it has in months, and yet there is silence in the Western press. So let's look at some of these recent attacks. Let's look at all these different things that have been happening. Because when you look at it, you see that it is in fact a cascading effect. They are all interrelated. Because these attacks that Ukraine carries out, they are affecting the soldiers on the front. But the attacks that the Ukrainians carry out back in Russia affect Russia's ability to wage war, affect Russia's ability to have money, affect Russia's ability to manage their own country. Budgets in Russia are being squeezed because exports are stalling. And that's because Ukraine is attacking Russia's oil refining capacity. Look at the attacks that we saw in Primorsk, the ones in Ust-Luga. Look at how we had these attacks in Novorossiysk. Look at the ones in Crimea. These attacks are choking, stopping the export of oil, driving up the cost. And all of this is something that Russia desperately does not want to see happening. Because without oil, without the export of oil, Russia is in a difficult position. Urals crude now is selling at a very deep discount. The Russians have not anticipated this. In fact, right now, the costs are simply too low for them to be able to balance their budget. This is a budget that's incredibly bloated by a military which they cannot afford, a military that is burning through money and it is not satisfied. And that is why it's shaking down banks across the country to give loans to the military industrial complex to produce more goods. But very often, those companies producing those goods are actually managed by people that have ties to the government, and they have no intention of ever paying back those loans, which then is creating a different problem, a crisis in the banking sector. All of these things are tied together. The soldier in the front who lacks materials, because back at home, back in Russia, the corruption is so out of control that on paper he was given supplies. But in fact, that factory was given money just as something to embezzle. He will receive no supplies. He will go to the front virtually empty-handed. All these things tie together. The corruption military industrial complex, the problems on the front, or whether it's the attacks on the lifeline of Russia, on the oil industry of Russia. Russia is having a difficult position. Russia does not have a ready solution for how to adapt. So Russia continues to attack Ukraine day and night. There are drone strikes, and I assure you, it becomes very loud in Kiev. And yet, the drone strikes or the missile strikes are not changing the course of the war. Ukraine's not losing more territory as a result. Ukraine's economy is the same as it was before. Day-to-day life continues exactly as it was the evening before. But in Russia, it's not the same, because Ukraine is successfully attacking the very nodes that are necessary to have a stable society, the very nodes that is necessary to make sure that Russia could continue to operate. But by attacking these different things, Russia has very few options. What can they do? What options do they have? Because realistically, they don't have options outside of oil. They don't have means to supply their military except when it goes through their corrupt brokers, those who often are tied to the military-industrial complex itself and the military, or at this point, to the FSB. And the FSB is quite laser-focused. It has a clear objective. It wants to put more Russian generals in jail, not just to control them and to take power, but also to take over the illegal businesses they had, to embezzle the money that they had formerly embezzled. All of these things are tied together. The most important thing, though, is this. What we see inside of Russia today, whether it's the problems on the front, or it's a problem with the supplies, or is it the problem with refineries or the export of oil, or are there the many domestic problems, including the persecution of the military by the FSB? In no case, though, are those unique. Are they specific? And are they special? The fact is they are occurring more and more every day. And there's a reason for that. And it's very simple. And that is the key point, is that Russia is becoming unraveled. All of these things are interrelated. And though they seem distant, they seem totally unrelated, they in fact are. Because when Russia has less oil exports, it then has less cash. When it has less cash, it can't satisfy its own population. It has less money for the FSB to embezzle. So the FSB persecutes Russian officers. And at the same time, the Russian officers, just making their bosses happy, send their soldiers off to die in higher numbers. The soldiers in the front are having a hard time, and that's all related to the fact that there's less money going around. And so more is being stolen, so they get less supplies. They get less attention because their officers are more focused on making sure that they don't go to jail than they are focused on what happens to their troops. All of this is interrelated. All of this shows that Russia is being attacked. It is being forced to reroute oil from places like Primorsk or Ust-Luga and Novorossiysk. These extra miles, these hours, erode their margins. It's stretching out their air defenses. It's making sure that their munitions are spent without any terrain that is gained. All these are rising costs as oil is under pressure. What you're seeing right now is not a one-off. It is not a symptom. When an oil refinery burns, or if the Ukrainians repel the Russians, or if the Ukrainians liberate a village, or if the Russian economy becomes further unbuckled, they all are interrelated, because these are all signs of the cascading effect, the very nature of the gravity of the attacks against Russia. These are not just inconveniences. These are signs of serious problems yet ahead. The things are about to get worse for Russia. So in the days ahead, look how Ukraine liberates more villages, liberates more towns in Donetsk as well as in Sumy. Take a look at the new refineries that will undoubtedly be struck by Ukraine. They will attack more of Russia's ability to refine oil. But these attacks are all changing the tempo of this war. They're making it harder for Russia to continue engaging. They are going to make it harder for Russia to export oil, make it harder for Russia to supply its own citizens, as well as its military. And we can expect that the queues at the gas pumps will continue to grow. Ukraine is retaking land while choking Russian fuel and freight. Front momentum and rear pressure amplify each other. When fuel burns and rail slows, artillery goes quiet. If this place holds, Moscow cedes initiative or must seek terms. But in no case are things going anywhere as Vladimir Putin expected for his 3-day special military operation. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, please subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. And as always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.